You walk into the garage and something feels off. You can't name it exactly. The room is clean, organized even, but the air is heavy. The corners feel forgotten. And when you step into your windowless guest room or pass by that closed bathroom down the hall, the feeling is the same. Not dark exactly, but dull, static, lifeless. And that's because the energy is doing exactly what the space invites it to do, nothing. In Feng Shui, every room speaks, even the silent ones. And when a room lacks light, it doesn't just lack visibility, it often lacks vitality. But there's good news. You don't need a skylight, a major renovation, or a sun-drenched window to shift the energy. You just need the right plant and the right placement. This video is not about decorating. It's not about styling. It's about functionality. The kind of functionality that ancient energy systems understood long before electricity and interior design. Because energy doesn't move because a room is pretty. It moves because something inside it is alive, intentional, and aligned with the laws of nature. That's why even a small, humble plant in the right corner of a windowless space can become more than decoration. It becomes a conductor, a protector, a purifier, a subtle partner in clearing stagnation, anchoring intention, and reminding your space and your subconscious that energy still exists there, that it's welcome, that it has purpose. So whether you have a basement that feels forgotten, a laundry room that feels like a void, or an internal powder room that nobody quite knows what to do with, this video is for you. Because Feng Shui was never just for open concept homes with vaulted ceilings and panoramic light. It's a system built for adaptation, for balance, for understanding how the smallest shift, a breath, a bowl, a branch, can change the whole rhythm of a room. And in spaces without natural light, where qi, life force energy, tends to slow or even stall, the solution is not mirrors or artificial enhancements alone. It's plant life, but not just any plant. Today, I'm sharing 4 Feng Shui-aligned, low-light tolerant plants that do more than survive in closed environments. They quietly transform them. These are not just the easiest plants to keep alive in the absence of sun. These are energetic allies. Plants that are structurally and elementally suited to stimulate qi in dense spaces. They won't demand attention. They won't sprawl, but they will do what's needed. Absorb stagnant frequency, redirect flow, and re-infuse forgotten corners with purpose. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, but isn't a windowless room just a room? Not in Feng Shui. In this system, every room holds a function. Every direction carries symbolic meaning. Every material, texture, and presence either supports or disturbs your field. A room that lacks natural light often falls out of harmony with the wood element because it lacks growth, breath, and upward movement. But with the right plant, you can reintroduce that wood energy softly, naturally, and sustainably. And with the right container, you can balance it with earth. With the right location, you can anchor it with water. And with the right awareness, you can turn a lifeless room into a support system for your health, your mood, even your financial energy. Now, here's the part I want you to remember before we move on. Not all plants are equal in energy. A struggling fiddle leaf fig in a dim room doesn't uplift chai, it mourns it. A flowering plant with high water needs may physically rot in low light, and energetically it will begin to drain your space. So we're not looking for trendy plants. We're looking for energetically stable, low maintenance, and symbolically powerful species that are known to work in real-life American homes, not just in ideal Feng Shui environments. And I'll even include a few real-world examples of how public figures who quietly use similar strategies. Not because celebrities hold secret knowledge, but because they live high-pressure, high-traffic lives that often require precise control of space and energy. From Keanu Reeves to Michelle Obama, you'll see how intentional placement of plants, yes, even in windowless rooms, can support groundedness, clarity, and mental recovery. But first, before we get into the specifics, I want to ask you to do one small thing. If you believe in building homes that not only look good but feel good, if you care about the atmosphere of your daily life, if you've ever walked into a room and felt your mood shift without knowing why, this is your space. And I'd love for you to be part of it. Take just a second to like this video, share it with someone who's trying to fix their space from the inside out, and subscribe to this channel. New Day Mindfulness. We're building toward 2,000 subscribers, and your support helps keep this grounded, realistic Feng Shui content alive. No mysticism, no fluff, just energy, clarity, and space that supports the life you're actually living. So, are you ready to give your dark rooms a new job? A quiet ally? A breath of fresh chi without ever opening a window? Let's start with the first plant, and this one may already be in your home, quietly waiting for you to give it a better purpose. How plants work without light. In classical Feng Shui, plants are not simply accessories or aesthetic flourishes. They are dynamic carriers of wood energy, one of the foundational elements that govern the flow and balance of qi, or life force, in any space. Wood qi is the energy of upward movement, of renewal, of rooted ambition and steady growth. It is what brings resilience to a home, what fuels new beginnings, what nourishes expansion. Whether that expansion is personal, financial, or emotional. When we introduce healthy, thriving plants into a room, what we're doing energetically is more than decorating. We are planting intention. We are anchoring life. But in rooms without natural light, windowless spaces like basements, internal bathrooms, converted garages, storage alcoves, and ground floor offices, we face a specific dilemma. The very thing that wood energy depends on in nature, sunlight, is absent. And so the instinct for many homeowners is to give up on plants entirely in these spaces. They assume that if a room has no natural light, no plant can survive, and thus no wood energy can be sustained. The result is that these rooms become energetically stale, functionally disconnected, and symbolically forgotten. They turn into energetic voids, not because they are dark, but because they lack vitality. In Feng Shui, the problem is not darkness itself, it's deadness. And the solution isn't always light, it's life. This is where modern Feng Shui steps in. Not by rewriting ancient principles, but by expanding their application to fit the real architecture of the homes we live in today. We don't all live in open-air courtyards or temples facing the morning sun. We live in apartments, in suburban homes with shared walls and interior hallways, in converted workspaces and reimagined basements. And many of us have to work with windowless rooms that weren't designed for natural circulation of light nor air. But energy doesn't require perfection. It requires movement. It requires intention. And yes, it can absolutely exist, grow, and even thrive in spaces without windows, as long as we bring the right collaborators into the environment. The key is understanding that some plants, unlike others, have evolved over millennia to thrive in environments with minimal light, high moisture, or inconsistent temperatures. These plants don't merely tolerate low-light conditions, they adapt to them. They originate from dense forest floors, from shaded jungle beds, from environments where the sun filters in slowly and unpredictably. And because of that history, they bring with them a kind of energy that is deeply restorative, quietly potent, and uniquely suited to enclosed human spaces. When brought into homes, especially homes with dark corners or internal rooms, they become more than survivors. They become rechargers. Energetically, they act like batteries plugged into forgotten outlets. They don't just survive the environment, they actively change it. In Feng Shui, every object introduced into a space sends a message. That message can be one of vitality or depletion, of clarity or confusion, of harmony or discord. And the message that a thriving plant sends, especially in a room that would otherwise feel stagnant, is a message of resilience. It tells the space that life exists here, that growth is possible here, that energy doesn't need direct sunlight to flow. It needs the presence of living, breathing vitality to start its circulation. A low light tolerant plant, properly placed, tells the chi of a room, you are no longer forgotten. You are no longer sealed off. You are a part of the living system of this home, and you are being tended to with care. And this is essential. Just because a plant survives in low light doesn't mean its energetic function is automatically beneficial. Even the strongest plant can energetically backfire if it is placed in the wrong area, paired with the wrong container, or left neglected. That's where most people go wrong. They treat plants as objects, not participants. They assume any greenery is good greenery, regardless of the elemental balance of the room, the plant's energetic structure, or the surrounding materials. In truth, the exact same plant can be a life giver in one room and a key drainer in another, depending entirely on how, where, and why it's used. For example, a ZZ plant may thrive in a fluorescent lit storage room, but if it's placed in a position that blocks a door or is paired with a harsh metal container in a wood-dominant corner, it begins to weaken the energy field it was meant to support. Likewise, a snake plant, while known for its air-purifying properties, can create cutting energy when placed directly across from a bed or in the wrong elemental sector of the Bagua map. These are not just aesthetic details, they are energetic mechanics. And when we ignore them, the plant becomes just another object. But when we honor them, the plant becomes an active agent of change. That's why this video focuses not just on which plants can survive in windowless rooms, but on how they function energetically in those rooms, how to pair them with the correct element, and where exactly to place them to generate the kind of energy you want. Whether you are trying to stabilize a chaotic garage, energize a neglected bathroom, soften a sharp-edged laundry room, or breathe life into a basement you barely use, the answer is not found in a catalog of best houseplants. It's found in the intersection between the plant's natural structure, its elemental resonance, and the room's energetic need. We're going to walk through 4 specific low-light plants, each one selected not just for its ability to survive without sun, but for its ability to heal the specific chi deficiencies that windowless rooms often suffer from. We'll look at their energetic roles, their best placements, and their elemental compatibility with materials and containers. And we'll address common mistakes like overclustering, underwatering, or choosing glossy pots that bounce rather than ground energy. Because in Feng Shui, the details are not cosmetic, they're communicative. The shape of the leaf, the color of the pot, the placement relative to a door or mirror, these are not small things. They are messages, and the clearer those messages are, the more coherent your space becomes. So as we move forward, remember, this isn't just about survival. This is about subtle thriving. This is about teaching your home's quietest corners to breathe again, not through noise, but through life. Because sometimes the most powerful energy isn't the kind that floods a space. It's the kind that quietly says, this space matters too. Let's bring it back to life. And that begins with one living plant. Shall we begin? Plant 1, ZZ Plant Bond, the quiet stabilizer. Among the rare plants that can thrive in a closed, windowless room without complaint, the ZZ plant, Zemiocolcas zamaeifolia, emerges not as a flashy presence, but as a quiet stabilizer. In classical Feng Shui, where every object holds intentional weight, this plant carries the steady, cooling qualities of wood energy but blends seamlessly with the still waters of yin space. It does not demand to be seen. It does not rush to grow. Instead, it brings with it the enduring strength of silence, of presence, of a life force that neither flares nor fades, but simply endures. And in rooms that are easily overlooked, an internal hallway, a guest room that rarely hosts guests, or an office buried behind two closed doors, this stability is not a luxury. It is a requirement. When a space lacks natural light, its chi tends to drift. Without sunlight to lift the chi upward and keep it moving, the energy flattens. It gathers dust in corners. It becomes inert. And what Feng Shui teaches us is that stagnation in space breeds stagnation in life. You might find yourself losing focus in that office, procrastinating longer than you realize. Or you might notice tension in guest rooms that never feel welcoming despite beautiful furnishings. These are not flaws in decoration. They are flaws in energy architecture. The ZZ plant, with its thick, dark, waxy leaves, becomes a quiet remedy for this. It collects light, whatever scraps of low-spectrum illumination are available, and it uses them to survive, metabolize, and persist. In doing so, it mirrors a very specific energy signature: the ability to make the most of limited resources without complaint, without burnout, and without drawing unnecessary attention. That's why in Feng Shui, we consider the ZZ plant particularly suitable for the north sector of a room, the compass point that governs career, purpose, and life path. This is not the space of wild creativity or social expansion. It is the space of depth, of clarity, of resilience under pressure. And in rooms that serve practical functions, whether it's a windowless office where financial planning happens, a hallway that connects two important zones of the home, or even a converted pantry where someone quietly works or reflects, the ZZ plant becomes an energetic anchor. Its structure, upright but not loud, firm but not aggressive, reminds us of the energy of persistence. Its presence says, I am still here. I do what needs to be done. And I thrive, not in extravagance, but in equilibrium. From a five-element perspective, this plant holds an elegant interplay between wood and water. Its leaf structure is classic wood, upward, columnar, photosynthetic. But its sheen, its depth of tone, and its affinity for moisture-rich soil and low light pulls water energy into its field, and water nourishes wood. So when we place the ZZ in a matte black or deep ceramic pot, we are not simply making a design choice. We are reinforcing this elemental bond, enhancing the plant's stabilizing effect, and reinforcing the flow of chi through the north corridor of our homes and lives. In the center of a room, the Tai Chi zone, it can also function as a rebalancer, pulling energy back to equilibrium when surrounding furniture or objects feel scattered or jagged. But here is where the nuance comes in. Because in Feng Shui, even the most beneficial object must be placed with discernment. The ZZ plant's stoic energy, while powerful in offices or transitional zones, can become too emotionally flat in spaces that require vulnerability or softness, especially bedrooms. While not dangerous, it can introduce a subtle sense of emotional suppression. It may harden chi where you want to open it. So if you are placing a ZZ in a rest space, make sure to offset its stillness with soft elements. A rounded ceramic figure beside it, a textured pillow nearby, or even a small textile in earth tones. The goal is not to avoid contrast, but to soften it, to give the ZZ plant a reason to relax its guard. Keanu Reeves, who has become something of a modern symbol for grounded presence in a noisy world, offers an unexpected example here. Known for his minimalist lifestyle and emotionally reserved demeanor, Reeves reportedly keeps plants like ZZ in his living spaces, not because he is a Feng Shui devotee, but because the energy makes sense. The ZZ doesn't beg to be watered. It doesn't shrivel when forgotten for a week. It simply continues. Much like Reeves himself, it stays rooted and still, even in a chaotic world. That kind of energy is not loud, but it is felt. And in a culture obsessed with brightness and speed, it is often the slower, quieter energies that restore us most. So as you consider which plant to introduce into your windowless spaces, don't just think in terms of survival, think in terms of service. Ask yourself, what kind of support does this room need? Is it emotional stability? Is it energetic consistency? Is it a reminder to stay grounded when the world outside spins? If the answer is yes, the ZZ plant may be the exact ally you've been overlooking. But remember, your plant is not just surviving your environment, it is translating it. And when you give it the right home, the right container, and the right respect, it will return the favor, not with flowers or fast growth, but with the kind of energy that lasts, quietly, reliably, and completely. Shall we move on to the next one? Plant 2, snake plant, the vertical guardian. The snake plant, Sansevieria trefasciata, is often misunderstood. In design circles, it is celebrated for its striking geometry, low-maintenance character, and sleek vertical presence. But in the world of Feng Shui, its deeper value lies in the energy it holds and the direction it asserts. This plant is not decorative, it's directional. It does not blend, it defines. It is one of the few house plants that carries an innate martial structure, upward, pointed, fierce in stillness. That's what makes it powerful, and what also makes it dangerous when misused. The snake plant channels sharp, ascending qi that fuses the activating qualities of wood with the assertive flame of fire. Its leaves are blades, not metaphorically, energetically. They pierce through energetic clutter. They slice through stagnation. And in windowless rooms where energy tends to pool in the corners and collapse inward, garages, laundry rooms, interior stairwells, or entryways without natural light, that kind of assertiveness isn't just welcome, it's essential. Where most plants bring a softening quality, the snake plant brings a vertical command. It stands like a guardian, especially when placed near angular walls, tight corners, or spaces where qi is blocked by clutter or architectural compression. That's why it is particularly well suited for functional rooms with yang purpose, like workshops, enclosed garages, or even office nooks without windows, because those spaces benefit from activation. The snake plant acts as a silent sentry. It doesn't sprawl, it doesn't soften, but it directs, drawing energy upward and keeping the air around it taut, clear, and responsive. Its role is less about emotional comfort and more about energetic defense. What makes the snake plant uniquely qualified for windowless rooms is not just its form, but its biological resilience. It requires little water, tolerates low light with grace, and actually improves indoor air quality by removing toxins like benzene and formaldehyde. In Feng Shui, that biological function parallels its metaphysical one. Where most plants require ideal conditions to purify qi, the snake plant does so under pressure. It thrives in neglect, not because it loves abuse, but because it's designed to stand its ground. And that's exactly the energy it brings to spaces that feel lifeless, heavy, or energetically compromised. It doesn't whimper, it doesn't wilt. It cuts, it protects, and it stands tall even in darkness. But this same energetic trait that makes it so potent is also what makes it controversial. In rooms where yin energy should dominate, especially bedrooms or meditation zones, the vertical rigidity and pointed form of the snake plant can become excessive. It generates what classical Feng Shui calls sha qi, cutting energy that can overstimulate the nervous system or quietly disrupt rest and relaxation. Especially when placed at eye level, the sharpness of its leaves creates subconscious mental tension, as if something is pointed directly at your forehead. That's why the placement of the snake plant must be precise, not cautious, but intentional. Do not place it beside your bed. Do not put it directly across from your favorite chair, and never place it on a desk where its pointed leaves are aligned with your direct line of sight. You don't want to be mentally pierced while you're working. You want to be protected. So where should it go? The best use of a snake plant is in transitional or semi-active zones of the home. It belongs behind a door that swings open aggressively, where it can act as an energy redirector. It belongs in the far corner of a garage or basement where stale energy sits and needs to be stirred without light. It belongs in a hallway or under a staircase, subtly lifting energy that would otherwise stagnate. And if you must place it in a softer zone, like a shared living room or adjacent to a wealth corner, do not leave it unaccompanied. Pair it with a rounded ceramic planter in earth tones, drape a soft fabric nearby, or place a small bowl of smooth stones at its base. These touches do not weaken its function. They temper it. They remind the plant and the energy it governs that strength is most useful when it's not cutting for the sake of cutting. The snake plant is often referred to as mother-in-law's tongue in the West, a name that hints at its sharp reputation. But in Feng Shui terms, its role is closer to that of a sword-wielding sentry, unblinking, unyielding, holding the line where energy tries to collapse. And that's a vital function in any home that wants to balance softness with structure. As with any martial energy, it must be balanced. But when used correctly, it is one of the most powerful tools available for enclosed spaces with blocked qi. It brings verticality where there is compression. It introduces discipline where there is decay. And it reminds a space that it is still being watched, still being protected, still being held. So do not be afraid of the snake plant. Respect it, use it wisely, and let it serve the home not as a showpiece, but as a blade held in silence, present, intentional, and always standing guard. Ready to look at the next plant? Let's continue. Plant 3, Aglaonema, the adaptive harmonizer. Aglaonema, often referred to as Chinese evergreen, may not command attention like a bold money tree or a dramatically structured snake plant, but its power lies not in dominance, but in quiet, steady integration. In the language of Feng Shui, it speaks in soft tones of harmonization, diffusion, and adaptation. Where other plants stretch, climb, or pierce, Aglaonema unfolds. Its wide oval leaves, often patterned with silvery green brushstrokes, are designed not to cut through energy, but to spread it evenly. It does not direct qi like a blade, it cushions it like a breath. And in rooms where space is tight, movement is limited, or environmental fatigue has set in, such as internal bathrooms with no natural air, sealed ground floor apartments wrapped in synthetic surfaces, or closets that act like energetic dead zones, Aglaonema becomes a quiet harmonizer, recalibrating the space not through confrontation, but through gentle, expansive presence. The energetic structure of Aglaonema is classic wood, but not aggressive wood. It is soft wood qi, the kind that fosters calm momentum, slow renewal, and breathability. It does not provoke transformation. It enables recovery. That's why in Feng Shui, it is particularly recommended for spaces that are structurally rigid. Rooms that are too boxy, too geometric, too devoid of natural curves or texture. In such place, the wide, soft, asymmetric growth pattern of Aglaonema introduces a visual and energetic diffusion. It unhardens the corners. It loosens the tightness. It allows breath and flow to return. And that alone changes how you feel in a space even before you realize why. Its adaptability is what sets it apart. Some plants merely survive in low-light conditions. Aglaonema adjusts. Whether the room shifts from humid to dry, cool to warm, dim to fluorescent, this plant continues to offer consistent, stabilizing ki. It's why it's one of the few ideal plants for windowless environments that also experience temperature and humidity fluctuations, like internal bathrooms, laundry nooks, or even basement landings near staircases. Its energetic gift in those spaces is twofold. It brings in the upward movement of wood, and it stabilizes the overstimulation of fire that can come from excessive artificial lighting or reflective surfaces. It doesn't argue with the room, it balances it. From a placement standpoint, aglaonema is best suited for the east sector of a room, which governs health, family, and resilience. That's where its gentle growth energy can support the physical and emotional body without overstimulation. When placed near the foot of basement staircases or transitional spaces that typically experience energetic downward pulls, it serves as a subtle anchor that draws the ki upward again, helping reintegrate neglected areas into the broader energetic circuit of the home. Pairing it with a pale green or beige ceramic pot strengthens its grounding capacity and allows it to blend seamlessly into earth-oriented environments, further amplifying its harmonizing role. But perhaps its most profound function emerges when placed in rooms filled with artificial surfaces, plastic, vinyl, metal cabinetry, synthetic flooring. Environments common in modern homes, particularly in rental units or newly remodeled interiors. These materials, while practical, often create a hard qui that subtly exhausts the nervous system. Without softening counterpoints, rooms dominated by synthetic textures can become energetically depleting, spaces that look clean but feel sterile. Aglaonema, with its living softness and organic geometry, counters this fatigue. It reintroduces softness, not just visually, but energetically. The plant doesn't fight the synthetic, it rebalances it. It says, there is life here, not just function. This gentle power is echoed in the design sensibility of Michelle Obama, whose private interiors, though not always publicly photographed in detail, are often described by those close to her as layered, textured, and unhurried. While no direct source confirms the presence of aglaonema in her personal home, the aesthetic logic of her environment reflects the plant's energy perfectly. Calm without dullness, structured without aggression, soft without sentimentality. Her team has spoken about her preference for calming colors, soft greens, and unpretentious elements that cultivate focus without noise. In many ways, aglaonema carries that same spirit. It's not the loudest plant in the room, but it's the one that makes the room feel right. So as you consider which low-light plant to introduce into your more rigid, enclosed spaces, ask not just what can survive the lighting conditions, but what can soften the room's geometry, what can counterbalance synthetic fatigue, what can reintroduce a quiet sense of breath. Aglaonema does not announce itself, but it makes its presence felt. It recalibrates the space, spreads comfort, and gently reminds you that harmony doesn't have to arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes on wide leaves and soft patterns, restoring balance not by force, but by being steady, being green, and being exactly enough. Let's continue to the next. Plant 4, Fern, the emotional softener. The fern, whether in its classic Boston form or the lush embrace of a bird's nest variety, is not simply decorative greenery. It is emotional medicine disguised as foliage. In Feng Shui, few plants possess the same yin potency as the fern. It doesn't just soften space visually, it shifts the emotional temperature of the room it inhabits. In spaces where energy has become rigid, over-controlled, or suppressed, like an over-organized home gym, a basement laundry area filled with performance pressure, or a storage corner stacked with years of ignored memories, the fern brings what cannot be faked: breath, softness, and energetic forgiveness. Where hard materials dominate, where tension hangs quietly in the walls, the fern does not demand correction. It offers a release. Energetically, this plant is a direct channel of yin qi, cool, moist, receptive, and nurturing. Its fronds do not shoot upward in assertion or extend outward to demand space. They cascade, they ripple, they suggest the possibility of loosening, of untangling, of becoming emotionally available again. That's why ferns are not only visually soothing, but deeply restorative to stagnant or emotionally clenched environments. Unlike the ZZ plant, which anchors and protects, or the snake plant, which cuts through and directs, the fern unwinds. It doesn't organize qi, it lets it breathe. This function is especially critical in low-light, high-moisture areas that often carry trapped or unresolved emotional energy. A utility closet where tension has been tucked away. A workout room where failure and discipline intermix. A water heater corner where neglected chai accumulates. In these pockets of forgotten emotion, the fern reopens a channel for emotional flow, making the space once again human. Ferns, biologically speaking, are ancient. They evolved in damp, dim understories of primeval forests, flourishing in environments devoid of direct sunlight. That evolutionary path makes them uniquely suited to internal rooms where most other plants wilt. And that lineage tells us something deeper about their spiritual role in a modern home. They are bridges to softer epics. They bring in an ancestral, pre-verbal wisdom of softness, where you didn't need to push or perform to be safe, where presence alone was enough. Their fronds, feathered and layered, mirror the energetic act of disentanglement. You don't need to interpret the tension in a room to benefit from the fern's presence. It reads it for you. It absorbs, digests, and dissolves it. But it must be alive to do so. This is where care becomes the contract. Neglecting a fern is more than just a forgotten chore. It's a spiritual signal that emotional fluidity is no longer being honored. Unlike a succulent, which forgives forgetfulness, or a ZZ plant, which can endure abandonment, the fern is a mirror. Let it dry out completely, and you're not just watching leaves brown. You're witnessing the collapse of emotional nurturance in the space. A decaying fern in Feng Shui doesn't just mean a dead plant. It's a flag, a message, a warning that you are no longer allowing the space or yourself to feel with ease. That's why watering a fern is never a mechanical act. It is ritual. It is the energetic equivalent of hydration for the soul of the room. Water becomes not just maintenance, but a medium of emotional circulation. A fern that is thriving is a sign that softness is alive and functioning in your field. And softness is not weakness. It is what lets us bend rather than break. Placement matters here, and not just for survival. Placing a fern in the southeast sector, the traditional wealth corner, may sound counterintuitive at first, since wealth is usually associated with active, upward growth. But consider the deeper symbolism. What good is wealth if it is earned in tension, protected in fear, or grown in soil of self-abandonment? A fern in the southeast tempers ambition with gentleness. It reminds the chi of money to flow without pressure, to grow without war. In the southwest, which governs relationships, the fern's yin energy is even more poignant. It untangles emotional wires, softens resentments, and dissolves the edge of unspoken expectations. In either case, it is not a plant that commands fortune. It allows it to flow. If your space is limited or your layout tight, consider using a hanging basket. Ferns do not mind being elevated. In fact, suspending them allows their fronds to move freely and express their natural arc. This movement activates the water-wood axis of growth and flexibility. Just be sure the hanging container is not in a draft, not made of metal, which cuts wood, and not exposed to drying air vents. Clay, ceramic, or earth tone baskets are ideal, reinforcing the nurturing element. In modern interiors that are dominated by sharp edges, digital devices, and the constant buzz of productivity, introducing a fern is like placing an exhale in the middle of a sentence. It softens not just the physical structure, but the energetic expectation. And in homes where emotional exhaustion is the default, where families gather but do not connect, where routines are followed but not felt, the fern offers an alternative. A quieter template, a return to the idea that spaces should feel like they're breathing with you. The truth is, many people underestimate how deeply environmental design influences emotional behavior. But Feng Shui doesn't. Feng Shui reads the room not for what it shows, but for what it holds. And when it sees a room holding tension, it calls for softness. Not empty positivity, not fake smiles, but softness, vulnerability, a reminder that things can loosen, bend, heal. The fern, if you let it, becomes the translator of that reminder. Not loud, not performative, just quietly radiant, uncoiling in the corner, restoring breath where there had been none. Common mistakes to avoid. In Feng Shui, a plant is never just a plant. It's a translator between your home's physical conditions and its energetic potential. But too often, well-intentioned design choices introduce subtle contradictions that disrupt qi rather than nourish it. One of the most frequent errors seen in modern American interiors, especially in basement renovations, converted garages, or internal laundry zones, is the placement of bright light plants in dark, low-key eye environments. Take the fiddle leaf fig, for instance. Gorgeous in open concept lofts with floor-to-ceiling windows. But when forced into a basement or hallway nook with no natural light, its decline is not just botanical, it's symbolic. A suffering plant sends an energetic message of helplessness, of misplaced ambition, of disconnection between what the environment offers and what the inhabitant expects. Feng Shui reads that message as a mirror. "I can't thrive here" becomes the subconscious motto of the space itself. So the first principle is to match the resilience of the plant to the realities of the environment. In windowless rooms, choose plants like ZZ, snake plant, fern, or aglaonema, not because they're the trendiest, but because they've adapted biologically and energetically to make do with less. That's the spirit you want mirrored in your low-light zones. Quiet endurance, not forced performance. The second mistake is rooted in a modern obsession with greenery as decoration rather than greenery as function. Overcrowding plants in a room that lacks light or natural air movement does not create abundance. It creates congestion. In Feng Shui terms, this is wood qi overwhelming metal and earth, choking the energetic breath of the room. A windowless bathroom with 5 potted plants on the floor, 3 on shelves, and 1 hanging from the ceiling may look lush, but it blocks airflow, both literally and energetically. And without airflow, there is no circulation. No circulation means stagnation, no matter how vibrant the leaves. A better approach is minimalism with intent. 1 well-placed fern in a high-humidity corner will do more for the room's energy than 6 mismatched survivors gasping for breath. A single ZZ plant in a matte ceramic pot near a hallway junction can become a stabilizer, not just a filler. Plants need space to function, not just soil and water, but breathing room in the energetic field. When they're squeezed together in artificial darkness, they don't amplify qi, they dampen it. So the rule is simple: never crowd for the sake of aesthetic fullness. Let each plant serve a purpose. Let it stand as its own energetic agent. The third mistake, though often overlooked, can quietly undermine the entire effort, forgetting the role of the container. In low-light rooms where sunlight cannot energize the plant, the pot becomes an amplifier or a suppressor of intention. And in Feng Shui, every material, every color, and every texture speaks its own dialect of energy. All black plastic pots may be practical, but in energetic terms, they act like chi black holes that energize. They don't reflect, they don't radiate, they absorb and dull. In dark spaces, this can create an energetic void that neither plant nor occupant can fully overcome. Instead, the container should be chosen to complement and uplift. Terracotta, for example, introduces earth energy, stable, grounding, supportive, ideal for bathrooms or basements with excessive water or emotional dampness. Matte green ceramics enhance the wood element, reinforcing the vitality and verticality of the plant itself, making them ideal for career-focused zones like the north or east. Reflective glass containers, when used sparingly, introduce the water element, which can activate movement and clarity in otherwise stale corners. The right pot becomes not just a vessel, but a collaborator in energetic translation. And color does more than decorate, it directs. A pale beige calms, a deep jade energizes, a soft blue opens. These aren't aesthetic choices, they're frequency alignments. So when thinking about adding plants to your low-light spaces, pause before you reach for a trendy species or mass-market pot. Ask instead, what is the role of this plant in this room? What chi am I asking it to support? How will the vessel I place it in help or hinder its ability to do that work? Plants are not passive. They listen, they respond. And when chosen and placed with awareness, they become not just decorative accents, but living allies that participate in the emotional and energetic structure of your home. Mistakes in plant placement aren't just oversights. They are miscommunications between your intention and your environment. But once you start listening differently, placing differently, watering with awareness and positioning with care, the space begins to respond. Not with dramatic flair, but with something better. Ease, breath, and a kind of quiet coherence that makes even the darkest corner feel alive again. Final. Not every room in your home gets the sun, but that doesn't mean it has to feel dim. Light isn't only a matter of windows or wattage. In Feng Shui, true illumination begins with presence, with intention, with the conscious act of choosing life where others might choose neglect. The plants we explored today, ZZ plant, snake plant, aglaonema, and fern, don't just survive in the shadows. They hold space. They regulate the emotional temperature. They recalibrate the frequency of rooms that were once overlooked or dismissed as too difficult to fix. Whether tucked into the corner of a garage, cradled near a basement water heater, or sitting silently on the shelf of a windowless guest bathroom, these living beings bring more than green. They bring rhythm, they bring breath, and most of all, they bring you back into relationship with your space, not as a passive resident, but as an energetic participant. Remember, these aren't just plants. They're collaborators. They're subtle allies in the ongoing dance between what your home asks of you and what you are ready to offer it in return. And that collaboration doesn't require perfection. It asks only for attention, for placement that speaks not to trend, but to need, for care that isn't performative, but responsive. That at its heart is Feng Shui, not about decorating your way to good luck, but about embodying the flow of life through structure, symbol, and soil. So let me ask you, when you walk into your low-light room tomorrow, what do you want it to feel like? Quiet strength, emotional steadiness, a soft exhale after a long day? Then choose the plant that holds that intention. Let the container support that function. Let the placement speak that prayer. Because in spaces where you once saw only limitation, you now have tools. You have understanding. You have chi on your side. If this video gave you even one insight, one breath of clarity about how to transform a difficult room, I invite you to honor that shift. Like this video, because your energy helps the algorithm find more people like you. Share it with someone who's struggling to bring life back into a forgotten corner of their home. And subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. We're growing toward 2,000 subscribers, and every single one is part of a community that values grounded wisdom, thoughtful action, and homes that heal instead of drain. Together, we're not chasing aesthetic perfection. We're crafting energetic integrity. Integrity, one plant, one placement, one intentional breath at a time. If any of these plans called to you, let me know in the comments below. I read every one, and if you've placed one already, tell me, what changed? Because when you shift your environment even slightly, your whole story begins to retune itself. Thank you for being here. Let's keep growing quietly, steadily, and with purpose.